Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another evening at the Vancouver Enterprise Forum. And just for anybody we've got a few people still just making their way to the seats, but we've got 3 front row seats available just in the bottom right-hand side if anybody outside would like to come in and join. And if you're near the bar, I would like a Zywich and the 500, then just drop that off on the way over to these seats. That would be terrific. Our events would not be possible without the hard work of our events committee, who really work hard to make sure we got some terrific folks, please come on, that plan out the whole year and put a lot of effort into getting really great panels together. This event is brought to you by James McCartney from DCIT, David Moulton from Douglas College, and I'd like to sort of give them a big shout out and a round of applause for these guys for putting it together. We are already halfway through our current events season, and I'd like to take a minute to thank our many sponsors and supporters for the VEF. These people continue to host these events at such a reasonable price, so please acknowledge our sponsors and recognize them throughout the evening. So if we can just switch that over to the sponsor page. We have a number to announce tonight. We have RO, BCIT, BDC Venture Capital, SFU BD School of Business, Colliers International, Corporate Recruiters, Douglas College, Ernst & Young, Fasken Martineau Dumoulin, New York Institute of Technology, Vancouver Campus, PricewaterhouseCoopers Canada, Vancouver Economic Commission, Vantage Capital, and WealthFar. So that's a lot of groups that are supporting us, and we'd like to encourage any other sponsors who'd like to come up and help support the event. Also, we'd like to thank the Vancouver Economic Commission, who is supporting our lightning pitch portion of the event. And if I could invite David Moulton to come on up and moderate the lightning pitches for us. Thanks. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Moulton. I'm an instructor at Douglas College in sales and marketing. Douglas College is the largest college in the province that grants degrees. We've got a full business school, Commerce and Business Administration school. We also run a very active co-op program, but probably the thing that may be of interest to you is that we love to do service learning projects. So if you've got a project where you think having some fresh eyes from some young people, young students, might be helpful, come and see me, and we'll see whether we can arrange a project or not for you. We'll get this started with the lightning pitch. If I may first introduce Damien Kettlewell from Blisco.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. And my name is Damien Kettlewell from Blisco. We were founded in October 2013. We submitted our application to Health Canada in August 2014 for 2,100 kilograms of marijuana. Our Why Blisco, premium organic marijuana, aggressive patient acquisition strategy, premium package product, and customer service in 4 languages. The Blisco team, myself, I have a long experience in licensing. I currently operate 5 liquor licenses, and I've been completed a startup last year, 15-month startup, and had a big project in 2013 that closed for me. And then we got our quality assurance is led by somebody who worked at Health Canada for 25 years as an inspector, and he helped build their GMP standards. We've got an excellent security system team and a production team as well. Now, this is our production facility in Langley, 12,000 square feet. It's not worth anything until we get licensed. So this is a big slide here. But so there's 1,200 applications that are being submitted right up there. This isn't working too well, so I'm just going to talk. There was basically 150 folks in stage 2, which is right there. Staples, you don't sell the best spinner, but anyway, okay. So we're in stage 4. 120 applications that are in stage 4. And so we are raising $150,000 in a convertible note based on getting our ready to build. And you can see that we are in the top 16%. So 75% of companies have not made it through the initial step. And we are looking to get to stage 6, and we're looking to raise $150,000 to get to stage 6. It's self-financed by myself, but I'm looking to bring in a partner at this point. So I look forward to my slides are outside. So look forward to engaging with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. You pushed it a little bit there, but that's all right. Now I can introduce Brian McKay. 110 or 100 seconds goes pretty quickly, doesn't it? If I could introduce Brian McKay of Gray Zone Entertainment.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brian McKay, CEO and co-founder of Gray Zone Entertainment, and I'm here today to tell you about our cannabis-themed social game, Grow Show. So we know that of North America's 83 million millennials, 2/3 of them are fully in support of cannabis legalization. And we also know that games, pop culture, and social networking dominate their app usage, with games taking the majority of revenue on both Google and Apple's App Store. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a bold claim that young people like hanging out, smoking weed, and playing video games. And that's where Grow Show fits in. So Grow Show is a addictive social game and entertainment hub for cannabis-friendly millennials. But behind the scenes, it's a highly tuned marketing machine designed to sell curated products to a targeted niche audience. Grow Show is designed to weave itself into the social and cultural fabric of our users' everyday lives, turning them into brand advocates and monetizing them through the sale of virtual and real-world goods. More than just being the Farmville of weed, think of Grow Show as a connector and a facilitator, like your friend that throws the best parties, introduces you to their friends, and shows you all the coolest new products. And because we won't be touching the plant initially, we're free from much of the regulatory risk faced by other cannabis businesses today. We're currently raising $560,000 as a convertible note that we're going to use to expand our team, accelerate production, and launch Grow Show in the fall of 2015. I encourage you to stop by our booth and check out the demo, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And I'll introduce Chris Dollard from Envision Biomed.
Thank you, David. My name is Chris Dollard. My company is Envision Biomed, and we are currently pursuing a licensed producer application. Our security clearance is approved, and our zoning is approved. But that's not actually why I'm talking to you tonight. I want to talk to you about a problem that we're all facing, and that's the problem of customer acquisition. If you believe that the market's 500,000 people in Canada, or perhaps you believe that it's the 10% of Canadians that are cannabis users on a regular basis, or if you believe the market's actually the 90% who don't, you have a big problem because Health Canada doesn't let you advertise. So the first thing you have to realize is we do not live in an industrial economy anymore. We live in a connection economy. So we're building a connection economy platform. And this involves the tenets of coordination, trust, permission, and exchange of ideas. And not just exchange of ideas, but exchange of research, information, knowledge, and learning into one place. So we're creating a platform, and it's not a closed platform. It's an open one. So I want to use tonight as the opportunity to introduce what we're calling the Cannabis Discovery Project. We want to invite everyone, all stakeholders, researchers, clinicians, patients, educators, and suppliers, to join us and build this platform so that we can all collectively push back what we know about this plant that has been in prohibition for so long, and we can begin to learn about it in an accelerated way, because there's a lot to learn, a lot to catch up on, and a lot of benefit to deliver to the people of the world. So you can find me lurking outside if you want to talk a little bit more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And our last presenter is John Prentice from Ample Organics.
Well, hello, Vancouver. You've obviously got some better weather here than we do in Toronto. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm John Prentice. I'm the president of Ample Organics. We founded as a software company in August of 2014. We have the most comprehensive record-keeping solution available to Canadian medical marijuana companies today. We kind of go beyond the seed to sale and into a more advanced way of doing things called enterprise resource planning. So not only do you get the key features that you need in seed to sale, but you get features over and above that, such as advanced financials, payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, all that kind of fun stuff. Our traction has been incredible so far. We've got some great partnerships here in Canada, both with the Canadian National Medical Marijuana Association and Lift Cannabis. We are also completing our first large implementation at Afria Medical Marijuana in Leamington, Ontario. That's a 250,000 square foot greenhouse facility. So I don't know if you guys saw the Metro article last week. We've been doing very well. We are in conversations with the state of Oregon as well for their statewide record-keeping system, and we are currently in talks with the government of the Bahamas for their national medical marijuana program. So if you have any questions about record keeping or how we can help you with what you're doing, please do come out to see me in the front. I do have a table out there. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have about our products, our business, or in my perspectives on the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And could you have a full round of applause for the pitchers today? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, if I can organize a hot swap where the panel, if I can get you to join us up on stage, and lightning pitchers, if you choose, you may take a front row seat, or you can go sit by the bar and enjoy some drinks, or you can go fetch me a beer, like Zywich. Eventually, it's going to happen. So I'd like to thank the panel. We've got a terrific panel this evening and a very interesting topic. And I'd like to just mention that we have a Twitter feed. And our Twitter feed tonight is VEF High Tech. I didn't come up with this. My thought was more hashtag VEF dude with 4 O's. But we'll go with VEF High Tech. If you have a question anytime, just please give us a tweet and put a Q in front of your question, and we'll try and get those involved either in the discussion or at the Q&A session at the end. I would like to introduce, before I introduce James, just we have a Colony Networks providing the Wi-Fi for us, so if you don't have any reception, please just check your Wi-Fi, take a look at the Colony Open, and press go, 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 and you'll be connected, and you'll be able to get a good connection and tweet all you like. Just be careful what you tweet. We don't want to be rated by the RCMP later. So be careful with the terms users, hashtag, and we prefer the term cannabis. With no further ado, I'd like to invite James Wells to take over for us. James is with Chris Licks Investment Capital, and apparently interested in a different type of biomass this evening.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yes, I work for Chris Licks Energy Venture Capital. We're typically focused on early-stage disruptive technologies focused on the mining, the oil and gas, and chemical space. We're known for our green investing, but tonight we're talking about a different kind of green investing. The objective tonight is to elevate everyone's education around regulatory issues, investment opportunities, technology opportunities, and we've got a great panel to help us do that. We're going to be bringing you a perspective from venture capitalists, from private equity. We've got a scientist. The scientist here was the first to sequence the cannabis sativa genome. He's been studying it for over 15 years and likely studying it in a different way that some of you have been thinking about it. We've also got a member from the Society for Vancouver Dispensaries and also a former Premier, Mike Hardcourt. So we're going to do this in 3 sections. I'm going to pass it over to each of the panelists to give opening remarks. Then we're going to do a structured Q&A. And then for those who can log on to Twitter, feel free to submit your questions, and we'll do a Q&A for the last 10 minutes. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Sam Snimer to the podium to give you a general overview. Please put your hands together for Sam.
Take this down a little bit low, James's level. Hi, I'm Sam Snimer, and I'm really delighted to be back here at the Vancouver Enterprise Forum. This group was very much my community for 25 years while I was a general partner at Ventures West Capital, which is one of the major players in the local tech scene for quite a few decades. I left Ventures West a few years ago, flirted with consulting and angel investing and mentoring for a bit, and then I took a very sharp turn and decided to dedicate myself to establishing a healthy, responsible, regulated, and legitimate market for legal cannabis products and services. I established Locarno Capital, which is a small VC group focused on the legal cannabis market. I'm doing this because I think that the old policy of prohibition has been a huge failure and that the war on drugs has inflicted incredible harm on families all across North America. I also know that business can be a huge driver of social change and that venture capital working with entrepreneurs can unleash incredible changes in our society. I'm also involved because this is an incredibly fun and dynamic market, one that's going very, very quickly and is filled with the most interesting mix of rebels, activists, scientists, and entrepreneurs. James asked me to lead off so I could set the stage and provide a breathless introduction to this market, its stats, and its industry structure. So first, some context setting. The UN says that the global black market in marijuana sales is valued at about $142 billion per year. The U.S. portion of that is something like $30 to $50 billion per year. That's a pretty broad range because as an unregulated market, there's no industry association out there counting the beans. But there are several surveys which track usage across different demographics and regions and which can support a good guess when combined with fieldwork to assess the price of marijuana in the field. Incidentally, I'm not aware of comparable information for Canada. So much of the analysis I provide will focus on our neighbor to the south, where the market for most goods is 9 or 10 times as large as the one in Canada. You can see that the black market for marijuana is roughly comparable to the market for wine, but a lot smaller than the market for beer. In the grand scheme of things, marijuana is still a niche product that's used regularly by under 10% of the adult population, a much, much lower portion than the population that involves alcoholic beverages. Meanwhile, the market for legal cannabis products in the U.S. is now $2.7 billion, which is a tiny portion of the black market. Unlike the high-tech world, where new categories of products have to win over customers who've never had that need before, growth in the legal cannabis world is all about legal and regulated products replacing the black market. It's important to understand that cannabis has been legal in the U.S. for only a short while. California was the very first state to pass an initiative allowing medical cannabis back in 1996, and since then there's been a slow but accelerating series of approvals. Today there are 23 states and the District of Columbia which have in place laws permitting medical use. But those laws vary widely in what medical conditions qualify patients for access to medicine, how easy it is to secure a prescription, and in what form the cannabis can be sold. As a consequence, in some states like Colorado, about 2% of the population have cards entitling them to purchase medical cannabis, while in other states it's still virtually impossible to gain access to the medicine. It also takes a long time for each state to settle on its regulatory regime. Massachusetts, for example, approved implementation of a medical marijuana program in November 2012, but the first of its dispensaries won't be open until later this year, and most of the groups that it licenses won't be open until the middle of 2016. There's continuing work on the political front that is likely to be fruitful. So as more states approve these programs and existing states actually implement them, sales of the medicine will increase. In landmark referenda in November 2012, Washington and Colorado approved consumption for adult use. In those states, cultivation facilities, processors, and dispensaries are now opening up. Last year, November 2014, Alaska and Washington, D.C. approved their own adult use programs, which are going to be established over the next while. What all this means is that unlike most tech markets where market expansion forecasts are underpinned by a deep belief in build it and they will come, the growth in the legal cannabis market is based on a backlog of states implementing approved programs and on patients and consumers ditching the black market for the regulated legal market. Here you can see that the total U.S. market grew from $1.5 to $2.7 billion last year. That 74% growth rate has promoters naming cannabis the fastest growing industry in America and legal cannabis the next great American industry. The market is expected to continue to grow quickly, reaching $4.5 billion by 2016 and more than $10 billion by the end of the decade. A large part of the market is concentrated in a few major states, especially California, Colorado, and Washington, and these are the regions where there's been the most innovation developing new products and establishing new brands. So what's going on in Canada? while the U.S. has been racing ahead. Former Premier Harcourt and Dana Larson will likely discuss the place of dispensaries in BC, and they touch on the older federal MMAR program, which is the subject of John Conroy's class action suit, which just started off in federal court here in Vancouver. I wanted to provide a quick intro to the current MMPR, that's Marijuana for Medical Purposes Regulations, MMPR program, which was implemented by Health Canada starting in April 2014. This program was intended to replace the old MMAR. Like that program, the new system outlaws dispensaries and compassion clubs, but it also prohibits personal cultivation by patients as well as cultivation by caregivers. Instead, the MMPR gives Health Canada the right to license a relatively small number of industrial-scale facilities that must meet strict security, safety, and reliability standards. To qualify for access, Canadian patients must receive a medical recommendation, basically a prescription, from an MD, and they must approach the licensed producers through their call center. The LPs are not allowed to advertise their wares or to make promotional claims, and their only contact with the patients is through a call center or website. Of over 1,200 applicants, Health Canada has so far only provided licenses to 16 licensed producers, with a few more in the wings that have received partial licenses. At this stage, the timeline and the real qualifications for receiving a license from Health Canada are very, very unclear, and no one can say how many new groups will have received their license by this time next year. The MMPR program has been very slow to roll out due to a variety of problems, including inadequate supply, Canadians' reluctance to buy strange products from unknown vendors by mail order, the difficulty of gaining a prescription, and other issues. When the old MMAR program stopped accepting new applications from patients in September 2013, there were 37,500 patients enrolled. By the end of 2014, only 16,000 patients had enrolled in MMPR, and the 16 LPs that were licensed shared revenues of $15 million last year. The market's certainly going to grow in 2015, but it can't possibly increase enough to financially support 16 or more LPs, each of whom has made a substantial investment in capital and human resources. The smart LPs are in this for the long term and are organized and financed to go through some lean times to get there. Health Canada itself forecasts there will be more than 300,000 patients by 2024, and that number could easily double if 2% of the population qualify as patients, as they do in some of the American states. Of course, if we have a change of government and there's an adult recreational use program put into place, this space will become very, very interesting. I know many of you are involved in startups, and I wanted to give you a flavor of the incredible energy and activity going on in the entrepreneurial community. The ArcView Group is a specialty angel investment network based in Oakland. They've been in operation since 2011. When I joined them about 18 months ago, I was their 75th member. They now have over 400 active investors. They have reviewed 225 specialty companies just focused on legal cannabis, and their investors have written checks for over $25 million for about 40 companies. Another sign of the high level of activity for startups is Canopy Boulder, which is a specialty cannabis industry accelerator based in Boulder, Colorado. Many of the groups who approach this area just think about the world of legal cannabis as either being growers or retailers. And what I want to encourage people in this room to do is to think that it's a lot more than that. When growing cannabis was illegal, people attracted to the field weren't generally ones with technical and operational skills. They were the ones willing to risk being arrested and having their property seized. Now that there's an environment where investments are being made to improve quality and consistency of product, there are many more opportunities for innovation. And that innovation happens all through the value chain. Many of those opportunities call for high-tech skills, for example, in manufacture of better lighting systems and HVAC systems, development of ERP systems, like one of our quick pitch folks talked about, development of medical devices and new cannabinoids for biopharma drugs, or the creation of unique branded products. Wherever you look, there are great opportunities for entrepreneurs, and you really ought to take a look at those opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam, for a dose of the numbers. Now we're going to pass it over to Jonathan Page to give you a scientific viewpoint.
Stay seated.
Okay, that's totally fine.
Got the mic on? Yep. So I'm the scientist in the mix, although I'm a business person as well now. And I thought I'd introduce you to where the science is and how I think science is going to fill some gaps and develop business opportunities for investors and company founders. So I'm an adjunct professor in the botany department at UBC. I have my PhD from UBC as well. I'm also a co-founder of a company that's located on the UBC campus called Anandia Labs, and we're really focused on sort of solving some of the problems in cannabis using life sciences and biotechnology technologies and developing products and services in that area. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Jane. So one of our lightning pitch people talked about the science gap, the fact that cannabis or marijuana or hemp has been under a cloud of prohibition for more than 70 years. And that's also led to restrictions in scientific research. So there's this knowledge gap that is relevant to the doctors using medical cannabis, to recreational users using it. We don't know enough about this plant. And there's questions such as, doctors and the Canadian Medical Association constantly ask for more data on clinical trials for certain diseases or certain conditions. There's questions about dosage and side effects. I was just at a continuing medical education event last night in Vancouver, put on by a national organization in the cannabis area, and doctors were still talking about strains and side effects and percent THC. So there's a lot of unclear points out there still about medical cannabis. The pharmacology of the minor cannabinoids, so THC is the major drug in cannabis, but there's 100 or more other cannabinoids in that plant as well that are related to THC, but we don't know enough about how they work. So there's a lot of questions there that in that 70 years where cannabis has kind of been left behind, and now we're in 2015 where we have billion-dollar markets and hundreds of thousands of Canadians and millions of Americans using the product, that we really need to start studying again. One of the points about cannabis that's, I think, relevant is that it's, in a way, it's a pharmaceutical, but unlike lots of pharmaceuticals, it's very complex. So if we have a medication such as Tylenol 3, you go home with a severe toothache, you might be taking a medication like this. It contains two drugs, acetaminophen, the Tylenol component, and codeine, which is isolated from the opium poppy. And the point of that drug is pain relief. But if you look at cannabis, it's not just two components, it's hundreds of components that are modified by smoking, by cooking, by your body's own metabolism. There's THC, CBD, cannabidiol, which is in the news a lot as a potential treatment for epilepsy in children, and a large number of other chemicals called terpenoids, which are the sort of smell and aroma of cannabis. They all mix together to give these sort of a cocktail of things that mediate the pharmacology. So we see pain relief, appetite stimulation, reduction in nausea, reduction in spasticity, and of course the psychoactivity or the high. But those are all different by the different mixtures of the compounds in the marijuana. That's related to this idea that there's a problem with the current system in marijuana, where marijuana is classified according to strains. So there's hundreds of thousands of strains out there that are used either recreationally or now medically. Names like Purple Kush, Diesel, Headband. There's thousands of very, very interesting and creative names out there. And many of those strains have, or at least what's attributed to them, is specific effects. Strains that are more sedative, more stimulating, things that give you the munchies, stimulate appetite, things that put you to sleep, all sorts of differences, but we don't actually know what produces those differences. So the chemical basis for strain-specific effects are unknown. And you could say, well, for stoners, sitting on a chairlift at Whistler, that's no big deal. But if you're a patient dealing with pain or dealing with nausea and you want something specific to that condition, or at least is tilted towards treating a specific condition, we need to know more about that. There's two sort of main types of marijuana out there. Indica, which is more sedative, sativa, which is more stimulating. And if you go into a dispensary in Vancouver these days, you see the menu, it's often broken down by sativa and indica types, and Dana might talk about that later. I really encourage you to go in and talk to the people in the dispensaries. It's really interesting and very educational. Maybe they don't really want some golfers in there, but you can explain the purpose. But the chemical basis for the specificity of strains is unknown. Science really offers the solution. We need more in-depth chemical profiling. We need to know more about the chemistry of this special plant. We need to know more about the genome. James referred to the fact that my lab is involved in sequencing the genome, but that's just one genome. We sequenced the genome of purple kush, which we got from a grow-op, a licensed grow-op near Main Street in Vancouver, actually. So, and we also need to link that kind of information with patient feedback, therapeutic information, potentially clinical trial information, to start, if it's on the medical side, to start figuring out, what are in those strains that drive specific treatments. One other point I just thought was relevant for this crowd is that Canada has an advantage. Now, Sam talked about the sort of, rapid movement of the American cannabis economy, and that's true, but I think we also have some specific advantages here in Canada. One is that we're federally regulated. So Health Canada may be the slowest bureaucracy in Ottawa, but at least it's a national bureaucracy that you can sort of trust coast to coast. We have a leading position in science, particularly in clinical work. So Mark Ware at McGill University, who's a medical school professor, has led some of the only clinical trials using smoked or vaporized marijuana. We have great pharmacology in this area. We have the plant side, so colleagues of mine at UBC are working in this area with me. So we have a lot of good scientists, and we have societal acceptance. So there's a lot, especially in Vancouver, but across the country, this is a plant that's been embraced by Canadians. As I said, we have the federal regulation. We also have hemp, and Mike, you may talk about hemp a little bit. It's the sort of non-psychoactive cousin of marijuana. It's the same plant, the same species, Cannabis sativa, but it's grown mainly in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and a little bit on Ontario for seed and fiber. 80,000 acres of hemp in 2014. We export a lot of this as seed to the U.S. for granola bars and hemp hearts for forage, etc. So we have, and that's been legal as a commercial agricultural crop since around 1999 or 1998. The banks are open for business, and Christian may talk about that point, and the universities are more and more welcoming collaborations with industry. So in some ways they're being pushed by the current funding regime, but that's also an opportunity here. Innovation is needed, so science is needed, and Sam mentioned the value chain as it relates from sort of production to retail. There's lots of things in between. Within the sort of science and R&D side, we need testing labs to do quality control on marijuana. We need research and new information and innovation around integrated pest management, nutrition and hydroponics, tissue culture for the growing. We can't legally sell under the Health Canada regulations extracts and derivatives, but those are coming probably. There's court challenges, and that's a big sort of technology area that's going to require a lot of investment. And then on the sort of biopharma area, doctors are constantly asking for more clinical trials. Now that's a big enterprise, and it's going to take some really deep pockets and a real belief in a certain product to do more clinical work. But it may be necessary, and we see some already. One of the licensed producers in Saskatchewan is sponsoring an arthritis trial now. The tracking of strain-specific effects, as I mentioned before. And there's also traditional pharma drug development. So some of those cannabinoids, not THC necessarily, but the minor cannabinoids, they've been likened to a sort of treasure trove of pharmaceutical potential. And people willing to dig deeply into that sort of that chest of different chemistry may find something really interesting for the disease. So I believed enough in this that I founded a company that really sort of pulled me out of the federal science system. I worked at NRC for a decade, which included work on cannabis and hemp. But I came back to Vancouver because I thought the time was right to really fill this science gap with some commercial activity. So I have a UBC-based company. We have world-leading expertise in the metabolite side and the genomic side, and we also have some IP, which we've licensed in IP that I invented, but it comes back to us from NRC. And we're using that knowledge and IP and expertise to really start to solve some of these problems I mentioned. So things like, if we can understand what an optimal strain for sleep and insomnia might be, we can start breeding towards that using genomics and other tools that are really the 2015 version of plant reading rather than the 1950 version, so we can move more quickly. There's defined mixtures of cannabinoids and terpenoids that are probably equal to some of those strains. And there's also the sort of future, and this is something I talked to James about, is cheap and scalable cannabinoid production systems. So cannabis is a great platform for producing chemicals, but the plant is not the only way to do that. So there might be other ways to use synthetic biology, for example, fermentation systems to make cannabinoids. And with that, that's a sort of snapshot of science, and I will be hoping to talk more about science as this forum moves along.
Thank you, Jonathan. Quick round of applause for Jonathan. The next speaker came here from the States. His name is Christian Groh. And Christian and the rest of the panelists, if I could just ask you guys to compact your talk maybe below 420 seconds, that'd be great. You want to come up here? Sure. I'll lower it for you.
Good evening. My name is Christian Groh. I'm one of the founding partners at Privateer Holdings. We're a private equity firm dedicated to the emerging legal cannabis sector. We've been around for about 5 years. Just to give you a little background on our fundraise to date. Back in the summer of 2013, we closed on a small round, a $7 million US round. It took us about a year and a half. My partner likes to say it was the hardest raise in North America, which it probably was based on the content of our portfolio. Since then, we raised a convertible note. We raised $15 million in February of last year, and we're on the back end of closing a $75 million round, which we should wrap up in the next 30 days. On the screen, we have our portfolio of companies. I'll just run through those real quick to give you an understanding of how we view investments and how we deploy capital and some of the companies that we look for and what we look for in companies. We acquired Leafly back in late 2011. When we acquired it, it was essentially 3 software engineers. They were the software design team at Kelley Blue Book, kbb.com. At the time of acquisition, they had about 150,000 unique visitors and essentially 0 revenue. You fast forward Leafly to now, it has about 5 million unique visitors per month. App downloads are north of 100,000 downloads per month. Revenue is coming close to $1 million a month. It's a subscription model. We sell to dispensaries and consumables product companies. They list their products and services on our website, and we connect them to consumers and patients. It's been a great first acquisition. It won GeekWire's App of the Year. We went head-to-head with Microsoft apps and other technology companies, so it was a big coup for us to win that award. It's actually fairly popular in Canada as well. Our second project is Tilray. Tilray is one of, I believe it's 16 licensed producers under the MMPR. We acquired a plot of land in Nanaimo a little over a year ago. It was a 35,000 square foot empty shell of a building. We built it out in the course of 3 months and put a mezzanine on it. Deployed about $25 million in the capital in the building, and went through the licensing process with Health Canada. We had a provisional license end of March last year and started shipping products end of April last year, and have been shipping medical grade cannabis to patients all across Canada ever since. Up there, like I said, it's 60,000 square foot. We have approximately 39 different grow rooms, grow different strains, like John said. We're really interested in the science behind that as well. We have about four 4,000 registered patients. We're growing our patient base every day. We have approximately 110 employees just at Tilray. Our third pillar or third project is Marley Natural. We made that announcement in November of last year. The announcement alone it was received by about 2,000 media outlets, and it had about 2 billion impressions. So we have a 30-year global license for the Marley Natural brand in conjunction with the Marley family. So it's the Marley Estate and Trust. We will be launching products at the end of 2015. We kind of break it into 3 different categories. Accessories, so pipes and bongs and trays and grinders and such. The second line will be topicals, so lotions, lip balms, CBD infused products like John also mentioned. And then the third piece of it is the actual cannabis product, so dried processed flower and consumables. That's all very depending on the legal nature of the areas in which we launch. We're very careful about what we do. We don't violate any local, state, or federal law. That differentiates us from most of the other people in the space. On the flip side of that, it makes it very, very difficult. I come from Silicon Valley Bank, traditional venture capital. I was there for years. We worked with 60 to 70% of all early stage venture-backed startups and the venture firms that they invested in, and we worked with nanotechnology and air and wind power and very bleeding edge designs, and it was complicated. But this industry is so complicated if you want to do it right, and the science is so important, and there's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of people out there saying that they have the keys to the kingdom or the right way to do it, but it's really just a lot of noise. Another point I wanted to make, there was also some recent press on us around our fundraise. We were one of the first groups, or the only group that we're aware of, that was able to raise institutional capital, real, true institutional capital. Founders Fund and Peter Thiel are major investors in Privateer Holdings. That story alone also received about 2 billion impressions. And what that really did for this entire industry, it was really a watershed moment. It gave people and investors permission to explore and invest in the emerging legal cannabis field. So it's been a big coup. That story went to 35 different countries around the world. We really set out to start this venture for a couple different reasons. One is to end the harms caused by prohibition and to create billion-dollar companies. And we think we could do it by brands, and we really do think brands fuel change. If you go to dispensaries in Vancouver or Phoenix or Barcelona, Spain, you will see the ubiquitous pot leaf and the nurse in the bikini, and part of our objective was to avoid the cliche and the pun. We really respect the scientists and the professionals in this industry that are trying to solve real problems and not to cater to the lowest common denominator. So it's been our charter. That's what we're trying to do. My focus on this panel was to talk about business and brands, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, Christian. Next, we have a familiar face. Mike, do you want to kick it off?
Thanks, James. I'll do it from the seat here. And I guess some of you are wondering what a former premier is doing sitting here. But before I became a premier, I was a criminal defense lawyer for 15 years. And then, of course, became a council member and a mayor, and then leader of the opposition and premier. So I graduated around the same time that John Conroy did, who's now having quite a go at it in the court just down the street. I'm here not to talk about the fact that as one of four former mayors of Vancouver, we signed a letter requesting the legalization of marijuana for all the reasons you've heard about here. The harm that has happened to millions of people for this product that was made illegal in 1937. But I'm not here to talk about get high. I'm here to talk about get well, and that's what True Leaf is about. It's as you heard from Chris and you heard from John, there really are two distinct strains, if I can use that word, and approaches. And like Chris, True Leaf that I chair, I was asked by Darcy Bumford, who is our founder and CEO, if I would be interested in being part of starting a new company in the interior called True Leaf. And I said, after many sessions with him and seeing that this is a very legitimate group of people on the board and the staff and that yes, I would. I found out that True Leaf was one of the early applicants, number 48 at one point out of the 1,200 or so. But unfortunately, we had to change locations from Vernon because of a zoning issue to the thriving metropolis of Lumby. And that's where we are located now. We're halfway through the process, having to go back and reapply all over again. We have complied with all of the requests on the second location. I currently await Health Canada's approval. And we feel True Leaf is in a very good position to receive a license, the first stage, of course, the license to build and then the license to operate after that. Especially considering the fact that we've done our homework, we have submitted over 2,400 pages of documentation to Health Canada, dealing with all of the key areas that you should deal with. And I agree. I think Health Canada has put in place a very careful, thoughtful approach. Slow, cumbersome, but I think they're doing a good job in that area. We've been in constant touch with Health Canada as late as last week. And we have the full support at the community level of Lumby. We've got unanimous support of the council, including the variance that we requested and got, in an industrial site where we have an option on a plant to build and hopefully go into operation. We are in good touch with our MLAs and MPs. We have a good working relationship in terms of the concerns of the RCMP on security and other measures that are important to these operations and should be. Our current situation is, given that we're awaiting the approvals from Health Canada, that we're focusing on a new opportunity, which hasn't been talked about here, to generate revenue and to improve our brand equity. As you know, we're an MPR company, but we think we're more than that. We want to position ourselves as a quality of life company to deal with real ailments that people have and real solutions to those ailments that are acceptable to the medical profession and acceptable to the regulatory authorities. We're dedicated to that approach, not just for people. I'm here to talk about pets. Because when it comes to quality of life, we know the factors that are important, whether it be health, lifestyle, family, but those are also important for pets. How many of you in this room have got a pet? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Like, I thought there was catnip.
Right. This is another form of catnip. And we've got research that shows that pets improve our quality of life. And owners take less medication. They have lower cholesterol and blood pressure. So there are, some advantages to pets. As with people, though, quality of life is important for pets. And we've discovered that there's a real gap in the market to products that offer a better quality of life for pets as they mature, in particular. We recognize that situation because of our management team. Darcy Bumford, 30 years of experience, starting in 1985 as a young entrepreneur who started a pet treat company called Darford International. And he understands this area very well. Has a couple of dogs himself, and thought that this would be a great new opportunity. Our first step into the pet industry will be developing a line of pet products that are focused on hemp nutrition. And as you heard, John, there is substantial hemp production in Canada, and it's legal and it's a fairly large industry. Now, following that, we're going to do research, and I agree with everybody here that the research and assurance to the medical profession and patients in particular is absolutely essential. And that's what I hope as an industry we can get at that really important concern that not just doctors have, but we want to work with veterinary-approved cannabis-based pet medication. So this strategy is going to allow TrueLeaf to generate cash flow before we receive our MMPR license. Upon a license approval, it increases the flexibility of the company. We'll have many choices. We can proceed to develop the medicinal marijuana business or decide to continue to focus on pet medication business, or both. So we'll have that flexibility. In the meantime, the company will have the ability to grow its own strains for the medicinal marijuana market, and also its own cannabis-based pet medications. So we see this as a gap and a real opportunity to become a market leader by supplying cannabis-based medications to the $13 billion pet medicinal industry. And we agree that the figures for people is 40,000 existing through Health Canada, people with licenses, 400,000, 500,000 potentially, a 1.3 to a $2 billion industry. And so I think we're positioned to be in this new area very shortly.
Okay, thanks very much. Lastly, we've got Dana Larson, who has spent over 20 years in this space. Dana, you're going to come up here? All right.
All right, it's a pleasure to be here and to hear what everyone else has got to say and to share some ideas about the future of medical cannabis in Canada. And I think my job is also to remind folks how we got where we are now and what the current situation really is, what's going on, because we have two parallel tracks in the medical marijuana industry in Canada right now. We've got the things we've been talking about here with the licensed producers, but we've also got a thriving market of dispensaries and underground cannabis, and that's also running in the same way at the same time. And the only reason we really have a medicinal marijuana situation in Canada, the only reason we're really here talking about this is because of the people who have done civil disobedience and court cases to push the government into getting us where we are now. The government has never, any Canadian government, liberal or conservative, has never embraced the medical cannabis industry. They've never done anything more than the absolute minimum required by court decisions again and again. They've been very hostile to the program, and they still are. And that's why I'm really grateful that I'm not stuck being an LP, and as a dispensary operator, we have a lot more freedom. I kind of feel sorry for the LPs sometimes because they're struggling to work with a very hostile bureaucracy that does not want them to succeed. And, you know, what we're seeing now with dispensaries proliferating outside of Vancouver and into other cities, we've got Parksville and Grand Forks and Kelowna, and dispensaries are opening across the country. It's not just Vancouver. And this actually reminds me very much of where we were in the 1990s when it came to bong shops and head shops, which are, by the way, still illegal under Canadian law. Selling a bong or a pipe or promoting a vaporizer can get you 6 months in prison and a $100,000 fine. This law is still on the books. In fact, a few weeks ago, a bong shop in Kirkland, Ontario was raided. This happens about once or twice a year where some small town or sometimes a bigger city goes in and shuts down a bong shop. And we know these devices are actually medical devices, harm reduction devices for patients who want to consume their cannabis or recreationally or medicinally. We know a water pipe or a vaporizer are safer, but we still have these bizarre laws on the books that are not really enforced very much and yet are still there and enforced sporadically. And I think there's a hostility between these two tracks and between these two groups, between the dispensaries and maybe the activists and between the corporate or the LP kind of sphere. And I think we see it on both sides. I know a lot of patients detest the licensed producers. They see them all as profiteers who are collaborating with Health Canada to eliminate their power to produce their own medicine cheaply and force it to buy from them at inflated prices. Whether or not that's true, that is a very common sentiment among medical marijuana users, especially those who are really involved in the movement, those who understand the laws very well, those who are the activists or the thought leaders perhaps. There's a great deal of hostility towards the licensed producers. And when you have licensed producers, some of them have been very friendly, but certainly others have put out tweets and comments that they're against dispensaries. They see them all as criminals that should be shut down. They believe home cultivation should be stopped and eliminated. And I think, well, if I'm a patient who's growing my own cannabis, and I've got a company saying you should have to stop, do that, and buy it from me, if I lose my right to grow it, they're the last ones I'm going to choose to buy my cannabis from, you know. But the LPs, I think, are in a position of not wanting to antagonize Health Canada. They don't want to participate in lawsuits and complaints because they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. Right now, we've got 2 court cases going on, one of which is going to benefit LPs more than anybody else if it passes, and that is a court case in the Supreme Court of Canada about the right of patients to access extracts in food products. This was an activist dispensary in Victoria whose baker got raided, and they've gone through the court levels, and the question is going to be whether or not patients should only be able to get smokable whole buds, or whether they should be able to get what I think is a far more medicinal product, which is extracts and capsules and food products and creams and all these other things. Well, when we win that case, who's going to be licensed by Health Canada to make those things? It's the LPs. Yet I haven't seen a single tweet, a single comment, and certainly not a single dollar donated to that cause by any of the licensed producers. And if I was a patient, if I knew that one LP was standing up for my rights as a patient, that's the one I would want to register with. That's the one I would go to and license with. But I think, again, they're afraid of antagonizing Health Canada, and so they're ultimately finding themselves on the wrong side of this equation. And I think that we're going to win that case. And we're also going to win the case that's in the federal court right now about patients' rights to grow their own cannabis. And any LPs who are hostile to people growing their own cannabis, like, get real. If you can't compete with somebody growing their own cannabis at home, if you can't make a cheaper, better product, that's like saying the tomato manufacturers, and you can't grow tomatoes at home, and we can't compete. You should always be able to produce a better, higher quality, lower priced product when producing it on a big scale than someone making it in their home. And if you can't, then what's the point of being there? And so, I think that in terms of where the business is going to be and where the interest is going to be, I really think the long-term legalization of cannabis in its ultimate form is not going to be about buds at all. Smoking buds and whole buds, that's going to be an artifact of the past. You know, there's always going to be a pot smoking culture and those who like smoking joints and that, but the real medicinal value and the real benefit of this plant is going to be in the extracts. And you don't need an indoor grow operation with all the sophistication they have now to produce those things. In fact, the vast majority of cannabinoids produced in Canada are produced by those hemp farmers. It's the hemp farmers that are producing vast quantities of CBD, which they are forced to mulch back into the soil. They can't sell it. They can't do anything with it. They have to destroy it under the rules of the hemp industry. And by the way, our hemp industry is also still regulated by Health Canada. It's not Agriculture Canada. Health Canada issues those licenses, and they're doing as terrible a job with the hemp industry as they are with the medical marijuana industry. Farmers get their permits too late to plant. They have to renew every year. It's the same kind of bureaucratic nonsense and challenges that we have with the medical marijuana industry. But I believe that the long-term legalization really should mean cannabis being grown outdoors in vast quantities. I think any level of cannabinoids you want should be ultimately legalized like that. But even if they just took the hemp industry we have now, that's growing CBD, if we just took that and could collect that CBD up, they're throwing it away. It's a waste product. They could legally, if they were able to have a regulation and government control over that, you could sell that profitably for $1 a gram for pure CBD, which is an incredibly cheap price. And that's how you eliminate home cultivation. You make marijuana cheap and affordable. You make marijuana extracts available so no one's going to bother growing their own at home. But if the only option is to buy it from a Health Canada licensed producer for $10 a gram, I can grow it at home for much cheaper than that. I can buy it from the guy down the street that I was buying it from before. There's not a lot of motivation to switch over. And we're seeing that in Washington right now, where they've got a 75% tax on their marijuana. People don't want to buy it, especially those who are really going to be driving it, those who smoke a lot of cannabis. If you smoke one joint a week, or you're just an occasional recreational user, you don't care if it's $10 a gram or $20 a gram. But if you have to use 10 grams a day for your purposes, that becomes very, very expensive. And those are the ones that are going to be driving the industry, the ones that are buying a lot of cannabis, that have to use a lot of cannabis. Those are the valuable customers, and they simply cannot afford to pay those rates for their cannabis. So, I think in the really long run, ultimately, like any other agricultural product, we'll probably see when the world has finally legalized cannabis everywhere, that we'll be importing cheaply grown and produced extracts from other countries where labor is much cheaper. They can make those extracts. Extracts can last, easily shipped, very lightweight, easy to transport. That will be the ultimate. Perhaps one day we'll have the government encouraging folks to use Canadian marijuana products and not to bring them in from cheap labor from overseas. But that, I think, is the positive vision and what I'm working towards. But I think there's another vision of legalization that frightens many people, and that is that we'd be stuck with the increased prohibition on cannabis home cultivation, that all the instruments of cannabis prohibition remain in place, and the only legal option is some kind of genetically modified Monsanto weed, shredded up like tobacco in some terrible way. And I think a lot of patients are really worried about that tobacco is the future of the marijuana industry, and it's going to be a low-quality, crappy product that's full of toxins, is what the government's going to try to foist on us. I'm not sure that's where it's going to go, but certainly that's a concern among a lot of people, and I think it's something that's going to need to be addressed. And so in terms of where I think the money can be made or where this industry can go, am I almost out of time, or I got a while? I would say that it's going to be in, right now the money being made is in stocks right now. It's in the stock, it's the people buying and selling shares. That's where the fortunes are being made in the legal marijuana industry right now. The actual amount of cannabis being sold is trivial compared to what's going across the counters in dispensaries in Vancouver. But I think that things like quality testing, a simple and easy method to test the potency of cannabis, to test for impurities, to test for things like pesticides and fungicides and chemicals like that. We do that kind of testing in our dispensaries, but it's challenging and expensive to do it to all the products. It's a slow process where you've got to send it out to somebody and they've got to bring it back. And so realistically, it's hard to do that kind of stuff for all your products. I think that kind of testing could be really important. And I'm just going to give you a little historical tidbit that might amuse you. I've been writing a history of cannabis in Canada, and testing these products has actually been an issue for a long time. And in the 1800s, there was a thriving medical marijuana industry in Canada, but it was all based on tinctures. And they didn't really know what the active ingredients were. They hadn't isolated cannabinoids. They weren't sure if it was the resin or the oil or what was really going on, but they could make these tinctures, and some doctors were reluctant to prescribe them because the effects could vary quite widely depending on what kind of product you got. You might get nothing or you might start hallucinating. And so Park-Davis would advertise that they were the only companies that did biological testing on their cannabis tinctures. And what they would do for about 50 or 60 years, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was thousands of dogs that were getting tested with these cannabis tinctures on a regular basis. And they had a whole procedure worked out where they would give the dog a certain amount of tincture and they would record how long until its front legs buckled, how long till it fell over, till it passed out. And there was a science behind using the same dogs multiple times as a baseline, but you can't use the same dog too much because then it starts to build a tolerance and maybe starts to... And I'm not big on animal testing, but if you've got to have one of the animal testing gigs, I wouldn't mind having that dog if that was the only option, if that was an option. But anyway, so that's where I think we are. I think the future of legal cannabis is not in indoor operations under lights, trying to produce perfectly manicured buds that are free of any contaminants. That is very difficult and expensive. I think the future of cannabis legally is outdoors, large-scale cultivation, extracting of cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, all those wonderful things, and then making very precise combinations of those extracts to whatever kind of combination of pure cannabinoids or mixes or whatever you like. And that, I think, is the future of our medicine and where the real money is going to be and where it's going to go. And I hope to see that in my lifetime because it's going to be a long way from here to there. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana. Just out of curiosity, how many people here have actually been to a dispensary? Okay, so about half. I was going to direct the first question at you, Dana. I heard that there's over 100 dispensaries in Vancouver. Are they all going to be around in 2, 3, 4 years?
Not 100 yet, although it depends what time it is, I guess. They're opening pretty fast. I think that they're going to continue to proliferate, not just in Vancouver, but around the country. And they're not legal, but I say they're not legislated because the courts refuse to put anybody in jail for selling medical marijuana, and they shouldn't. And because the federal system has got such a problem in it, that's why they say we're filling a gap. We're providing things the federal system does not. And that's why we're sort of allowed to exist. It's a lot of work to rate them. But I think there's going to be more coming. But I do think the city of Vancouver is starting to impose some kind of regulation. They've been going around checking on things like fire safety. They've been telling the ones that have a vapor lounge and a dispensary together that you can't have both those things. We're not going to allow you to smoke on the premises or vaporize. You got to move that up. And there's been some other things like that. So I think there's going to be more. It's challenging to regulate them in this kind of way. But I think it's a positive step forward, and I think that that's going to continue. Vancouver City Council is committed to allowing dispensaries to operate. They've got to figure out how they're going to do that and what the rules are going to be. I think some are going to get shut down, but I think if we know what the rules are, we'll follow them. As long as the rules are reasonable, and I think the city is going to be reasonable, we want regulation. We want rules so we know what the limits are, so we know what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And sometimes right now we're not really sure if if we're pushing the envelope, if it's okay, or what the rules are. And so that will be gratifying. But I think there's going to be a lot in the future. They're not going away.
Okay. Oh,
On that, with something like 100 dispensaries in Vancouver, Vancouver has the highest per capita concentration of dispensaries anywhere in the world. More than Denver, more than any place in Colorado, more than LA. Is that for consumption by people in Vancouver, or is that all export to other parts of Canada?
I haven't heard the 100 figure. I've been hearing 60, 65 dispensaries
even at
in
70,
that range.
the truth is basically the same.
And there's what a dispensary is. I mean, there's some that are very strictly medicinal and have a lot of focus on that. Other ones I think are a lot more open in how they define that and are more kind of a coffee shop in some way or something. But what's your question? Like,
is it staying in Vancouver, or is it?
A lot of people come in from other areas to buy, absolutely, and that's spawning them coming up into other communities because people don't have to drive in all the way. But we also do mail order across the country, and we're not the only ones as well. So we do a lot of orders everywhere in Canada.
I'd like to give a little more perspective on that. One of our companies, Leafly, is a strain database, strain library. It's also a dispensary database, dispensary review website. Like I said, we get about 5 million unique visitors per month. But collectively, at least in North America, we have about 3,500 active dispensaries that use Leafly every day or every week. There are approximately 100 in Vancouver. As far as per capita, I personally think that's incorrect. In LA County alone, there's about 2,000 dispensaries. I don't know what the population is. I don't know what the ratio is, but they're very prolific, especially in Southern California. And what you see, and I don't know if you're experiencing this yet up in Vancouver, but in Southern California, there's still the raids and there's still the closures. But for every raid or closure that comes and they get shut down, 3 or 4 more pop up. Partners break up and they either go off and do a delivery or they'll open up another dispensary. But it's really kind of the whack-a-mole mentality. And we've seen that. We have seen this for years. We've literally seen it for years, and it's going to just keep operating that way.
That's the same here. I mean, they have gone after a few dispensaries in Vancouver and shut them down, but more open very rapidly. Right. Absolutely.
Whack-a-mole. That'll be a new brand of. Okay, in the audience, we have a lot of investors, a lot of entrepreneurs that are looking at this space and interested how they can maybe attack the opportunity. So this is to the investors in the group. What are sort of the areas or the opportunities that a layperson who could bring skills to the industry could tackle? I'll look at Sam or Christian.
Well, I'll just start off highlighting one. In the old world, when marijuana was sold on street corners, there were huge margins, and it really didn't make a difference how good the marijuana was that you produced or what it cost, because you could sell it for 5 times as much. We've seen in the last few years in places like Colorado, in the last few months in Washington State, and I believe happening right now in Canada, the price of legal marijuana is coming down and down and down. So people have to produce it much more efficiently. For folks who grow indoors, depending on your location, roughly 25% of the cost is for electricity. That goes into lights, that goes into HVAC systems, and anything you can do to decrease that reliance on electricity is very important. So there are lots of groups looking at new lighting systems, innovative lighting based upon LEDs or different kinds of HID lights, lots of innovation around different kinds of cooling systems, a lot of opportunity to focus there.
To add to that, in terms of the carbon footprint of a completely indoor marijuana industry, so if you took Health Canada's projections up to maybe 300,000 patients and you said, they're using 1 gram a day, et cetera, I mean, the carbon footprint of that, and if it's all indoor, which is one of the things about the Health Canada regs that, and Christian's talking about the Tilray facility in Nanaimo. I mean, it's a massive security enterprise to make sure that it passes Health Canada's secure checks. So to lock all that marijuana up under high intensity lights in reinforced concrete means that we're creating basically it's a city larger than Kamloops or something in terms of the household electricity use just to make medical marijuana. And if you start calculating how many times you'd run your dryer to the equivalent of a joint in your hand, it's an issue. Now certainly if we move down the road to legalization or like expanded use of medical or social use. I mean, what Dana says about outdoor growing has to happen, and it may eventually be like oranges. I mean, we're not growing those in Canada for a reason, and maybe in Jamaica and Morocco and Lebanon and places and Colombia where marijuana used to come from when it was imported illegally, maybe they're the hot spots for cannabis production. But I think the environmental impact and Sam's comment about efficient lighting and innovation around that is really important.
Christian, I agreed with your earlier comment how important brand is. I mean, some of these products are called the AK-47, some are the Girl Scout, and then you've got the Marley brand. And so can you just talk about that whole idea across your entire portfolio, how you're going to leverage brand?
Yeah, it really dovetails well into John's last statement. We see price variation globally. I was in Jamaica 2 weeks ago, and the price per pound was $100. In Colorado, 6 months ago, it was north of $2,500. Right, so there's big deltas there. I personally think it's going to take years to level the imbalance of supply and demand. It's some people are more prone to grow outdoors. They might like the naturally sun-grown, organic. Some people might want to grow indoors, science-based, to get that strain precisely right every single time. So you emulate those conditions every single grow cycle. But at some point, depending on how legalization goes, and I think everybody here can agree that the Berlin Wall of prohibition is coming down. There's going to be a glut of supply in the market. Right? There just will be, as you get more licensed producers and more dispensaries open up and new states come online and new countries come online. People are going to get really good at growing good cannabis. There's going to be good techniques, and there's going to be a higher pot. I mean, we just released a strain today which had 33% THC. It's just unheard of. I couldn't believe
What was it back in the 70s?
I don't know. I don't know if there was even testing back then.
7 or 8.
Yeah, wow.
Percent.
There was always good hash.
Oh yeah, hash was higher. Yeah.
So if, at some point, the consumer or the patient is, going to see this, wider range of different types of cannabis and different variations of THC and CBD and CBN and all the other cannabinoids and terpenes that are associated with this plant. But that's where I ultimately get to your answer. I think that's where brands come in, right? It's something that a consumer or a patient is comfortable with. I mean, right now and historically, at least for the last 5 years, what everybody's growing, whether in Vancouver or Denver or Phoenix, whatever they're growing, they're selling. They're selling at a premium, right? There's really good margins baked in. But as new people enter the space, that advantage ultimately diminishes. And what you need to replace that with is a brand, right? And it's not only just a brand, like, hey, look at my brand. It's what's associated with that brand. Has it been tested? What are the levels? What are the potencies? What are the flavor profiles? What does it smell like? Does a blueberry really smell like blueberry? Does OG Kush, is that really an OG Kush? So that's just on the dried processed flower side, and then you get into the consumables and the edibles, and that's a whole other array of branding and products. And then there's 1,000 vape pens out there today, right? Selling different types of oil. How do you determine which one's right as a consumer or patient? So that will evolve, and that's how we think about branding.
Okay, we're going to turn it over to the audience now. If you want to throw up the Twitter feed, there may be some interesting questions there, but we can go straight to the audience. If anyone's got a burning question. Okay, there's a burning question. There's a mic right next to you. Just try and speak right into it.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, first, hello to the other 5 maybe women in the crowd. It's a very lots of men here, which is good, all nice men, but it is interesting to be in a space that is so male. My question or my comment is, we're talking about brands and we're talking about licensed producers going via mail order. You don't buy Louis Vuitton via mail order. That human experience, that being able to consume the brand that you're interested in, I find that there's a gap between what Health Canada wants and where the licensed producers are going, and where the consumer needs really good tested product. So somewhere we've got to meet, and I don't know how we get there, but that's just a comment.
Are you saying you're not going to buy AK-47?
No, I'm not interested.
No, yeah.
I just know that the mail order, it feels completely detached. If I was a consumer, I would want to ask questions. I'd want to see it. I'd want to smell it. I'd want to try it. I'd want to give my feedback and understand the dosage. That's not something I'm going to get with this removed mail order. And yeah, it doesn't feel right.
Thank you. Any comments from you guys?
Yeah, I think the real issue is, as Chris has said, is the quality, and to make sure that you can get, for medicinal marijuana purposes, exactly the right strain and the right dosage for the particular ailment you're talking about, whether it's pain management, whether it's epilepsy, it's what I have, which is spinal cord injury. There's a lot of people who have pain issues and other issues, and doctors need to be assured that their patients are getting exactly what they should. And I think that's the huge challenge for the medicinal cannabis industry, and that's why I think it needs to be done as an association. It needs to be the people that are really serious about supplying a high-quality product for doctors' patients, that you can get exactly the right dosage and strain for the various ailments that people suffer in this country. And there's probably millions of people that may be able to benefit from that kind of a service.
I was going to offer an observation that among the LPs, licensed producers, there's a real segmentation. Some of them are going for street names, the AK-47s. I'd maintain that anyone who is literally selling green crack is not selling a medical product. On the other hand, you've got a few of the licensed producers who are going all the way to the other side. They're not using street names. They're calling it Canamed, Canamed 12-1, Canamed 12-12, or Adrobinal, which is very pharmaceutical sounding, virtually impossible to pronounce, trying to set themselves up as some kind of pharmaceutical companies and really fairly alienating to consumers. And then in the middle, you've got all kinds of other people, branding it, but in a gentle way.
One point about the mail order, like the Health Canada rules are designed to make it easy for Health Canada to regulate the industry. And it's just easier for them to do it by mail order than to have to make up rules for storefronts. It's easier for them to say you can only sell whole plants than to make up rules for concentrate. So that's why it's mail order only. It's because Health Canada's lazy and they make the rules for themselves, not for what's best for those who need the medicine.
I mean, I agree. We see, bricks and mortar retail in some sectors, like, bookstores. Obviously, there's people who go to a bookstore on Sunday afternoon and look at books and then order them on Monday at Amazon. And, that's kind of one thing. But I think when it's a tactile product, like you said, where you want to smell it, that's a huge part of cannabis strain selection. Talk to people. At the counter, I was attending this medical education event last night, and doctors were talking about, their inability to sort of guide patients about, should it be 8% CBD and 4% THC or 33% THC. The LPs are bringing that on with online and phone banks and the rest of it, but it's still, you need that sort of pharmacist-like interaction, or it's, pharmacist plus, lifestyle counseling and everything else. So I think it's really hard for the MMPR system to combat this sort of the retail logic of buying cannabis. And you're probably right that eventually they're going to have to see the light, because I don't think it's going to develop. I don't know. I mean, what do you feel about, as an LP, Christian, with the inability to go to patients directly through retail?
Yeah, so we have a 24-hour customer service line where patients can call our representatives and talk through the actual product itself. I know that doesn't help, and they like the smell and the tactile piece of it. I personally have probably been to over 1,000 dispensaries all around the world, and I've seen so many different models. You go to Colorado, and there's been this new trend now where you have to buy the pre-packaged cannabis, so you can't even touch it or smell it there. Not everybody's doing that, but it's trending that way. So you know, I don't know. As a patient, yeah, sure, you probably want to smell it and touch it. But I think if you could get the proper, consistent quality every single time, I think people would be okay with this mail order business.
Okay, thanks. We're going to go to the Twitter feed. We'll go to CNMMA. What is that? Cannabis Mixed Martial Arts. No, if we go down, that would be pretty boring, hey? Just like. No, if you scroll down, I think it was the number one issue facing. Oh, God. Yeah, there you go. Question for all participants. We'll take 2 answers. What is the number one issue facing the medical cannabis industry in Canada? I think we talked a lot about that. 2 quick answers.
Canada's
yes.
regulation system, that's the number one issue, is how the government's running it. All the LPs are dependent upon the Health Canada's making sensible regulations, which it is not, but I'd say that's the number one issue.
Karn, you had a question.
Thanks, James. Karn Manhas from Terramera Applied Science. I was curious, I was listening to many of your answers. Many of you spoke about some of the common problems that the industry is facing as it's starting to emerge and grow up and scale up. I've heard that from many producers as well. So one of the questions that I'm wondering is there a process that that growers actually have to collaborate and talk with each other? And Christian, Mike, both of you guys are involved in operations, investing in operations both in Canada and the United States. Are there grower associations that are forming, or any kind of process in place to help growers to deal with some of the common problems as they're emerging and scaling up in places like Washington, Colorado, and Canada with the licensed producers?
Yeah, so there's a lot of online forums where growers can interact with one another. You're starting to see associations form, regionally to talk about growing and different techniques. At Tilray alone, I think there's about 25 people on the grow side, and that group hangs out together. They go out for beers after work, and so it's really a passion for the people in this industry that like to grow. I mean, this is one of those questions where you ask 100 growers the proper way to grow cannabis, and you'll get 100 different answers, and they'll all be right, and they'll all say they grow the best cannabis. It's something that happens in this industry, but there's so many different mediums, so many different techniques, and we look at it as let's try them all. Let's figure out the best way to do this. There's so many variables and inputs that go into it. So yeah, you're starting to see a lot of the forums pop up.
Okay, we'll go to the top. Anyone way up there with a question? I was just going to check up there just to spread it out. No. Anyway, I don't see anyone, so go for it, sir.
It's regarding full plant profile being, the more potent and effective medicine as opposed to extracts. I just heard a seminar last week about the difficulty, I guess, to get the type of result you want with extracted elements from cannabis as opposed to medicating with the full plant profile. This is for you, sir. If you could comment on that as a PhD.
Yeah,
scientist.
so, the different extraction techniques are going to lead to the removal or extraction of different sort of components. So it's difficult to find a solvent or in the case of CO2, the right composition of CO2 to get everything out of the bud that will replicate what's in it, but in an extract form. So I think, that's sort of part and parcel of using different types of extracts. But whether that reduces the sort of therapeutic potential of the extract compared to whole bud, I think the jury's out. I mean, that's one point about the sort of science gap, is that we don't have that kind of knowledge. I mean, there hasn't been sort of a clinical trial or a retrospective study. Of course, if you go into a dispensary or maybe talk to, well, not an LP in the case of with extracts, but you can start to get at some of that information, but it's not widely available and it's quite anecdotal. So I don't think we really have an answer to say the pain relieving properties of an extract versus whole bud are different. Does that answer the question?
I just touch on that really briefly as well, is that there's different ways of making extracts, and a lot of the extracts now are just focused on the most THC and the most cannabinoids, and they strip other things out, but there is people who believe, and there's some research that the flavonoids and the terpenoids and those kind of things, but those can be put into an extract too if you want to. If you do it the right way, those things don't have to be removed. So you could make whole plant extracts, but I agree that pure THC or pure CBD is not as effective usually as a bunch of the cannabinoids together. They have the entourage effect where they work together. But you can make extracts that contain more of the plant and not just pure cannabinoids. And although more research needs to be done, I would anticipate that those probably have a wider therapeutic value and are better with the full plant in there.
We're going to shut it down there. You're going to have lots of time to talk to the panelists. Please give it up for our panelists, folks. I'm going to pass it back to Tim.
Very good. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much to the panelists. And I just was looking through some of the bios here and noticed that Dana was also running for the NDP leadership a couple of years ago. And just a informal straw poll, who would have voted for Dana and who would have voted for Adrian Dix? Let's go with Dana first. I think we know what's going on.
Where were you guys during the vote?
So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I'm not going to take too much time here because we did go a little bit over time. Just one quick, if you please, everybody, we have some food outside, but I know even if you did have some samples, please keep the appetite down to a minimum. We need to spread it around to everybody in the audience. Also, thank you very much for David Moulton and James McCartney for putting together this panel. Again, thank you very much for the hard work you've done. Coming up, we have a couple more events which are extremely interesting and exciting coming up. Next month, Clean Tech. We're going to be talking about the evolution of clean tech and how things have changed, the era of cheap energy, and then what's going forward. It's kind of changed a little bit because I noticed when I wrote that, I had 99 cents per liter. Now it's back to 120. So maybe it's just the evolution of clean tech, and regardless of cheap energy. Also coming up, that's partnered with NSERC, and NSERC is a big supporter of our organization as well. So thank you everybody for coming out. If you wish to join us as a member, you are able to get a season's pass for this at approximately half the cost if you were to go normally. So $200 will get you a pass to all of the events. If you are interested in our next panel's discussion and you'd like to see somebody who is a luminary or somebody you'd like to hear from, if you email Chris, Chris at VEF.org, C. McDonald at VEF.org, we will take a look at all of the nominees and we'll award a ticket, one and a drink ticket, I think that was, for anybody that nominates and wins the nomination for suggesting a great speaker. With no more ado, I'd like to invite you to have a beer, come on up, ask the panelists on an informal basis, and panelists, don't worry, we'll have somebody down here to take your drink order shortly. Thank you very much.